During the early years of the 18th century, in the reign of Tsar Peter I, Russian authorities became aware of the need for some naval presence in the distant Siberian possessions. Two factors demanded attention. For a number of years, Northern Europeans had searched in vain for a northeast passage which would provide easier access to Japan and China. The Dutch, French, and Germans urged Tsar Peter the Great that an attempt from the east might find this passage and properly chart some of the chimerical islands supposed to exist north of Japan. Russian naval involvement was given greater urgency when, by 1713, Cossack rebellion and attacks by the warlike Koryak and Chukchi tribes had reduced the Russian northeast to anarchy. Inaccessible to Russia's wild Cossack policemen on the shores of the Sea of Okhotsk, the peninsula of Kamchatka was in danger of being lost completely, along with the yasak, or fur tribute, which was gathered on almost the sole commercial product of the region. The only vessels available on those bleak shores was the native sheetki or sawn boats and other local river craft. Not one substantial wooden ship existed, nor could one be built, for there were no shipwrights to build or seamen to man them. Not an anchor nor any of the other hardware essential to even a small ship was available. Yet in Russia was to retain control of her east, it was imperative to get a ship afloat on that coast. There were two possible ways of getting a ship to the eastern seaboard. The sea routes, either by Cape Horn or Good Hope, were feasible, and apart from the last leg north of Japan, both routes had become well traveled. Under Tsar Peter, Russia was improving her Baltic fleet, and she could have drawn on the expertise of the Dutch and English to make the voyage. However, right up to the end of the 18th century, a pathological fear of the tropics seemed to haunt the Russian seamen. The attitude was nicely expressed by the poet-scientist Mikhail Lomonosov, an ardent supporter in the search for the Northeast Passage. In the old Peter the Great, the very ice which seems so awesome will offer us a path free of those fierce dangers. The alternative was to transport men and material overland on an incredibly long journey of well over 3,000 miles, which is about 4,800 kilometers, and this was the method undertaken. The first 50-strong party assembled and dispatched from uh, Yakutsk in July 1714 consisted of carpenters, seamen, and specialists. It was led by Yakov Neveitsin and Nikita Tryaska. With them went three anchors, about uh, 480 yards, which is 439 meters, of sailcloth, tackle, ropes, and tools. Timber was to be felled on the coast. At the mouth of the Ochota River, the first small ship was launched in April 1716. Named the Ochota, she was 51 feet, which is 15 5.55 meters in length, had a beam of 18 feet, which is 5.49 meters in length, and drew only 3 feet 4 inches laden. She was rigged with a single mast, probably carrying a gaff mainsail, staysail, and topsail. To draw so little, her hull must have been very like that of a scow. In June 1716, under the command of Tryaska, Ochota made her maiden voyage to Kamchatka. During the next few years, other small craft were launched. None were really more than large boats. The sheer isolation of Okhotsk and the scarcity of men and materials um, militated against any rapid expansion. It was difficult enough to build, sail, and maintain even the small craft in the dismal political and physical climate of those coasts. In 1721, two graduates of the new Naval Academy, Fyodor Luzhin and Ivan Evreynov, were sent east to ascertain whether or not Asia and America are joined by land. And you will go not only north and south, but also east and west, and will place on a map all that you see. In Okhotsk, the two had the Ochota repaired and sailed to Kamchatka. From there, in June 1721, they sailed southwest and charted some of the islands in the Kuril chain before a storm blew out their sails and forced them to lie ahull for a week. Driven to leeward onto Paramushir Island, they attempted to anchor using an anvil and a cannon. The cable parted, but they survived and limped back to Okhotsk. The charts the young officers brought back were valuable, and the piece of the North Pacific jigsaw fell into place. The relationship of Kamchatka, the Kurils, and Japan had been established. Most vessels built on the Russian Pacific shores for the fur trade or exploration ranged in length between 40 and 80 feet, which in meters is between 12 and 24.5 meters. Their shipwrights were often Scandinavians, so these small craft would have been similar to those plying the North Sea and the Baltic. There was a great variety of hulls and rigs, but from records it seems that the most common rigs used by the Promishleniki or hunter traders were hookers or galleots. A few larger vessels were brigantines or brig-rigged. Often sloops are referred to, but this seems to have been a general term, particularly in the British Navy, for a whole range of small craft stepping anything from one to three masts. However, single-masted craft were often used by the Russians. From Okhotsk or Kamchatka, the Russians would cruise through the Aleutians to the American mainland, hunting and collecting otter and seal pelts from the indigenous people. One of their small ships would carry up to 60 men for the season, and there were enormous losses in the miserable subarctic climate. Before they returned, it would be expected that over half would have died of scurvy or other diseases, and shipwreck was more than just common. Between 1801 and 1804, not one vessel succeeded in making the passage from Okhotsk to Sitka or Kodiak. All were wrecked and the supplies for the outposts lost. Up to the last quarter of the 18th century, because of the lack of iron, all these ships were wooden fastened. When nails became available, the ships built with them became known as grozdeniki or nailers. Most of the ships were so badly built and maintained that they were uh, downright dangerous. The same in a variety of size, although most used in the Pacific were small. Those are the hookers. Um, the rig could be viewed as a ship rig without the foremast, hence the long jib boom necessary for balance. Large hookers carried a mizzen topsail and often had their topmast fitted aft of the lower mast. Both the hooker and the galliot I have shown are based on the drawings of Frederick of Chapman in the last half of the 18th century. Later, the mizzen may have carried a boom. The gaff sail behind the mainmast was known as the spencer, and the top gallant was sometimes, but not always, set flying, that is, with no brace of lifts at it in the sketch. Galliots, nor the deep roach in the topsail to clear the stays, and the lead of the topsail braces to the gaff, then to the mizzen. The mainmast appears very poorly supported above the stays, whereas the lower mast seems to have the additional support of what we would term a running backstay. Galliots were generally smaller than hookers. Brigantines, as I doubt whether the shipbuilders of Okhotsk would have spent time, effort, and money in fancy work, I have shown this without the head rails and jib boom. Working ships in Europe often dispensed with one or the other. Without the brakehead and head rails, the gamming holding down the bowsprit was passed through a large ringbolt on the stem. That is the end.